Hello, everyone. I hope you are doing well. It has been a long time. I was not able to record videos earlier because a lot of responsibilities in college held me back. But I hope these videos will help the students do well in their SEC English examination. Let me just tell you in brief about some key concepts in communication. We will begin by looking at the question, what is communication? We communicate daily, but when we think about defining communication, it becomes a little difficult. But let us see how we would write about communication if we are asked to define it. The word communication comes from a Latin word which means to make common. So, what is common here? An information that is shared becomes common among the communicators. So, at the heart of any definition of communication, there is the concept of shared meaning. Now we may define communication in this way. Communication is a transactional process using symbols to create shared meaning. There are four important words in this definition. Number one, process. Two, transaction. Three, symbols. And four, meaning. We will look at each of them and you will be able to understand why we have defined communication in this manner. When we call communication a process, we mean that it is ongoing. It is never complete. Though physically the communication is over when we stop talking to a person, the effect of that communication lasts. We think about what we said. The person we talk to might think about what we have said, and it goes on. That is why it is called a process. There is the idea of continuity when we use this word. So the beginnings and endings are temporary. There is also another point. When individuals change, when cultures change with time, then these changes or these shifts also have a bearing upon communication. And that is why it is called a process. So communication is a process. What kind of process? A transactional process. That means it is a process involving some kind of transaction. What is the basic meaning of transaction? Exchange, right? And in this case, there is exchange of ideas, thoughts, information. Okay. So, communication involves simultaneous messages between or among communicators, between two people or among many people. Okay. Then we come to the word symbols. Okay. Symbols are like codes. All right. So they are representations for phenomena, like a word which stands for an abstract idea or something concrete. Okay, so the word becomes a symbol for that idea or that thing. All right, then our facial expression, how we look at a person, how we present our face, right? That will tell another person whether we are happy with them, whether we are angry with them. Okay, so our expression becomes a symbol or a code. Then our gesture, we do this to someone and the person will know that we are calling them, right? So it is a gesture. So that becomes another code or symbol for our wish that the person comes to this particular place. Okay. So we come to the last word now, and that is meaning. What is meaning? What people understand, what people make out of a message. Okay. And you will notice that in that definition, the word shared is within brackets. Why have I kept that word in brackets? Because shared meaning is the goal of any communication, but we may not always achieve that goal, which means communication may be successful, it may not be successful. It is not successful when the meaning is not shared, which means what I want to tell you, if you don't understand that, then the meaning is not shared. Okay, that means there are some barriers to communication. There are some things which don't allow communication to be successful, and we call them barriers. Okay, now there is another idea which is important to the concept of communication, and that is communication and intentionality. I must have the intention to communicate something, and then we will call it a communication process. I want to tell you something. Okay, so intention means that. Sometimes, however, in a communication process, what we don't want to convey, what we don't want to say, also affects the process of communication. Let me give you an example. Suppose you are in front of an interview board. Okay, so you want to tell the interviewers that you are fit for the job and you answer the questions accordingly. But while the interview is going on, suppose you cannot control your nervousness and you look here and there, your eyes move here and there, or you shift your postures while you are sitting, or your hands go like this. Okay, you're not aware of them, but you're doing all these things. Then these are unintended behaviors. You don't want the interviewers to see your nervousness, but then you cannot help it, and the interviewers will understand that you are not confident about what you are saying. Okay, so that will affect what you want to convey. You want to convey that you are confident, but these kinds of cues, these kinds of behaviors, they hamper what you want to convey. Okay, so this is something that we have to keep in mind. Then there must be purposes of communication. Why do we communicate? Okay, so let us go through them quickly. One, transmit information clearly and efficiently. So you want to exchange information and you want to do that clearly. Okay, then you want to understand what others say and you want others to understand what you say. Okay, then if you are part of a team, then it is important to coordinate actions and activities through proper communication. Then if you are in a classroom, let us say, you want to ask your teacher doubts, then that is a kind of communication. And what is the purpose of that kind of communication? You want to learn and you want to acquire new knowledge. You want to understand things properly. Okay, then you want to have a plan for your future. Then you talk to your parents, you talk to your teachers, you talk to those people whom you consider your mentors. Okay, and then you will have a good plan in front of you. All right, so it is important to prepare and plan for various situations, and communication helps you there. Then you accept change and adapt to new circumstances. That you have to do while you live your life. And communication has a role to play in that. Of course, communication helps you develop good relations and build trust. it helps you educate and inform people. Then communication is necessary for entertainment and for engaging in enjoyable interactions. Okay, then communication is important for solving problems and resolving conflicts. All right, so these are some of the purposes of communication. Then we come to the structure of communication, and I have already talked to you about the importance of the word transaction in communication. Okay, now look at the picture on screen and you will see that communication happens when a message is transmitted from the sender to the receiver. But now you might have questions in your mind. Why have the images, why have they shown sender and receiver together, only separated by that slash? What is the meaning of this? Okay, then what is the word channel in the communication process, and what do we understand by noise? Okay, now we will understand each term in the communication process. Who is the sender? The source of an idea or thought. So I want to tell you something, then I am the sender. Okay, then message, how the source encodes the idea or thought. So there is a thought to be conveyed. How do I encode that thought? That will be the message. So the message might be a piece of paper where something is written, okay, or the message might be a picture that is drawn, okay. So something which conveys the idea, that is the message. So now I have used the word encode. So then we must know what is encoding. Encoding means the process of turning a message into symbols or codes that can be communicated. Okay, so what will act as symbols or codes? Words or gestures or pictures or even sounds. Okay, so to convey a message, when we use some kinds of symbol or code, then that process becomes encoding. So who does the encoding? The sender of a message. The sender of a message encodes the idea or thought that is to be transmitted. Okay. Now, what is the channel? The pathway for the message. The message will travel from the sender to the receiver. So it needs a pathway or a medium. Okay. So I want to wish someone happy birthday. I might send that person a text message. I might call that person and wish them happy birthday. I might visit their home and wish them in a face-to-face conversation. So now the pathway for that message, which is happy birthday, the pathways in these three situations are different. Okay. So that is what we mean by channel. What is the channel of communication? We are talking about the medium through which the message is transmitted. Then, who is the receiver? The intended target of the message is the receiver, or the one who receives the message. Now, if the sender encodes the idea, then the receiver has to decode the idea. That means the receiver has to understand the code and therefore interpret the message. Okay. So what is decoding? The process of turning a coded message into an interpretation. Okay, so this process of understanding is what we call decoding. So who does decoding? The receiver does decoding using his or her knowledge and the social or situational context. Okay, you also need to be aware of the context in which the communication is happening in order to understand the message. Okay, so the receiver's knowledge is important and the context is important. All right, now we go to another important term, that is feedback. See, when we say that communication is a two-way process, it means the sender sends a message to the receiver and then the receiver sends feedback to the sender. And that is why when we are talking about feedback, the receiver, the person who was earlier the receiver, now becomes the sender, and the person who was earlier the sender now becomes the receiver. And now I think it will be clearer to you why those terms, sender and receiver, were used interchangeably in that diagram. Why, the sender and receiver were on both the ends. Okay, so the sender sends a message to the receiver and the receiver sends the feedback to the sender. So what is the feedback? It is a response to a sender's message. Okay. Now feedback may be verbal or non-verbal or both. Okay. So let me give you an example. I say something to you and you find it funny. Okay. So what will be your verbal feedback? You will say, this is funny. That is verbal feedback. What will be non-verbal feedback? When you don't say anything, but you laugh. That will be non-verbal feedback. You're not using words, you're not saying anything, but you're laughing. And from that, I can get the feedback that whatever I have said, you found it funny. Okay. Now, it could also be both, right? So you say, this is funny, and you laugh. So you're doing both verbal and non-verbal feedback. Okay. Now, feedback may be internal or external, right? So we have said something to someone. All right. Now, we are no more in that context. We are out of that situation. But we are alone and we think about what we have said. Did I say that in the right manner, or was it wrong of me to use those words? All these things, they come to our mind. When we are doing this, we are giving ourselves feedback on what we have said, right? So in that case, the feedback is internal. When we assess our own communication, when we judge our own communication. Okay. Now, feedback may be external, responses to your message received from other people. So, when other people have something to say about something that we have said, right, that becomes an external feedback. Okay. Now, in that diagram, there was something called noise. Though we understand what noise is, usually in communication, noise also means barrier in general. Okay, so it is not just physical noise, but there are other types of noises. All right, so noise or barrier is anything that interferes with the message. Okay, that does not allow communication to be successful. So what are the different kinds of barriers to communication? One is physiological barrier, which means biological influences on message reception. Okay, so I say something to you, but what I say is not clear because I have a problem with my tongue. My tongue stutters. Okay. And the person listening to me, if you are the listener, you're not able to understand the message clearly because I am not able to speak properly. And I am not able to speak properly because there is some biological problem with my tongue or with my teeth or, with my speech organs. Okay. So then that is a kind of physiological barrier. So I want to say something to you, and there is something wrong with your ear, because of which you are not able to hear what I say. Something biological, uh, some biological defect is there in your hearing, your ability of hearing. Then that becomes a physiological barrier. Okay. Now we come to physical noise. Noise as we understand it. Some kind of disturbance is going on in the background. Okay, some noise is there. Obviously, if a person wants to communicate something to us and that person is at a distance, we cannot hear that person because of physical noise. That is what we mean by physical barrier. Okay, physical noise. Outside stimuli that make the message difficult to hear. Okay, so, suppose you are outside on the road and you receive a call, and you're talking to that person, but you cannot hear what they are saying, because the person who has called probably is, near an area where a lot of vehicles are moving, and there's a lot of noise surrounding that area, and that is why you cannot understand what the person is saying. So this is what we mean by physical barrier. Then what is psychological noise or barrier? Internal noise. That means, now suppose I am really sad, something really sad has happened, and I keep thinking about that while I am talking to someone else. Then, whatever the other person is telling me will not be clearly understood by me, because I'm lost in my own thoughts. I have something really sad to deal with. So then, these sad feelings, they act as barrier to the process of communication. Okay, then what is a bias or prejudice? Suppose we have already formed an opinion in our head that this person is not good. Okay, it is an opinion already formed in our head that whatever that person says will seem negative to you. It might not seem negative to others who don't have that prejudice about this person. Okay, because you have that prejudice, because you already have thoughts going on. I know this person, she is not good, so whatever she will be saying will not be worthwhile. Okay, so all these thoughts will be going on, and then of course the message that she or he wants to convey will not reach you because of your psychological barrier. Okay, then what is a semantic barrier? Semantic, this word is related to meaning, meaning as conveyed by language. Okay, so semantic barrier means if the language is too difficult to understand, of course, communication will not be successful. So, what are the examples of language barriers? Jargon. Jargon is actually a term used to refer to words which are specialized words, which means they are used by people belonging to certain professions. Like, for example, a lawyer will use certain terms, or a doctor will use certain terms which common people will not understand. Then that becomes a legal jargon or a medical jargon. Okay, then technical language. For example, the person who works with technology, okay, has to know words like uploading, okay, then you have to understand terms like VPN, okay. These terms will not be understood by people who are not habituated with using the internet and working on computers. Then, unfamiliar words or phrases. Okay, so if I tell you that the sunset was ineffable, all right, so if you know the word ineffable, you will be able to understand my message. But if you don't know that word, you will not be able to understand what I am trying to say. Ineffable means something which is too good to describe in words. It is so beautiful, you cannot describe it in words. So if I say the sunset was so beautiful that uh, I cannot talk about it, or I cannot describe the beauty of the sunset in words, that you might understand. But if I say it this way, you will not understand it if you don't know that particular word. Okay, suppose you're talking to your grandparents, your grandfather, or your grandmother. They have newly learned to use WhatsApp, and you send them terms like LOL or BRB. Okay, they will have no idea what you are talking about, right? So, this is an example of semantic barrier. Okay, so these are different kinds of barriers that the process of communication has to face. All right. Then we come to two important terms: interpersonal and intercultural communication. What is interpersonal communication? It is the process of message transaction between two people to create and sustain shared meaning. So there are two people involved, the sender and the receiver. Okay. And they create some kind of meaning. The communication between them creates some kind of meaning which is shared by both of them. Okay, so and that will become clear how, when the receiver sends the feedback back to the sender. All right. Now interpersonal communication happens between two people, and this makes it different from group communication where more people are involved. Then we come to another important term, and that is intercultural communication. It is the process of message transaction across different cultures or social groups. Okay, when people belonging to different cultures they interact, when people belonging to different sections of the society they interact, then that becomes intercultural communication. When we talk about differences in culture, what are the things that come to mind? Gender, differences in gender, sex, generation, race, social class, then sexual identity, ability, how able are you? Are you, differently able? Okay, so that is what we mean by ability, differences in ability. Then spiritual or religious identity, geographical region, family type, nationality, all these things, they are components of culture, part of culture. And if people from different family types, okay, or people from different nations, or people from different religions, they interact with each other, then that becomes intercultural communication. Okay, now this picture, I found it interesting. This is a representation of intercultural communication where you see people belonging to different cultures. They are together and there is some interaction between them. And you know, these scenarios you will generally find in a university, okay, where people from in an international university where people from different communities they come and study, different countries they come and study together. Okay, or you will find this in a multinational company, let us say, where people from different cultures and different countries will come and work together as a team. So in these scenarios, intercultural communication becomes very important. Then we will come to the concept of uh, different kinds of communication. Communication is of various types, and these divisions also have different criteria. Okay, so we will see what are the different kinds of communication. Verbal communication involves the use of spoken words, including face to face talks, phone calls, and public speaking. Okay, so that is verbal communication, which involves spoken words. So, now I am talking to you while I'm recording this video. I am talking to you using words. So that becomes verbal communication. Okay, so it might be a face-to-face conversation, or it might be a session like this, or it might be talking over phone, or it might be addressing a larger public when you are on stage and you are speaking to a larger public. Then non-verbal communication. Non-verbal communication includes body movements, eye contact, and personal space. Okay, so here you are not using words, but you are using gestures, you are using facial expressions, you are using certain kinds of body movements, and you're using communication with eyes, eye contact. Okay, then written communication involves typing, printing symbols, numbers, letters, and writing to send a piece of information. Yes, that is what we mean by written communication. What is visual communication? It uses art, photographs, sketches, graphs, charts, drawings to pass on the information. Okay, so these are four main types of communication depending upon uh, the codes that they use, the symbols that they use. Then we will go to the next slide, where we will see some merits and demerits of oral and written communication. Okay, so there are some plus points and there are some negative points about oral and written communication. Oral communication is another word for verbal communication. Okay, now oral communication merits, it helps to get work done in less time. Okay, so you want to share a piece of information with your friend. Which is faster? Writing a letter to that friend and posting it, or calling that friend and sharing the information? Of course, oral communication is faster. So it helps to get work done in less time. And it also helps to get faster feedback. Okay, so you have done some work and you want to know whether it is all right. Okay, so which is better? uh, no, waiting to write to your teacher, let us say, waiting to write to your teacher uh, and ask him or her about uh, how your work appears, and receiving a written communication from him or her after a week, let us say, or immediately requesting your teacher after the class to give you some time and just respond to the doubts that you have regarding your work. Obviously it is the oral communication that is faster. But oral communication also has demerits. It can result in distortion of true meaning because it is not written. We cannot verify the information. So the information in an oral communication can be distorted. Okay. And of course, it can lead to misunderstandings if not understood clearly. Right. So if I say something to you and you could not see, whenever we speak, there might be ambiguity. Ambiguity means, a statement could mean either this or that, right? So when such confusing statements are there in an oral communication, it can create misunderstandings. In a written communication, always the context will be clear. Okay, and in a written communication, it is very important for people to think about what they write, but usually don't people don't think that much about what they speak, and that is why oral communication can lead to misunderstanding. Now we come to written communication. What are the merits? Easy to preserve, right? You can write an article and you can preserve it, so that you can refer to it again. But if you just share your ideas with your friend, that is not something which you can preserve, right? Then written communication leads to clear understanding. As I said, the context of the written communication will be clear, and that is why the message will be understood properly. Okay. And if it is written communication, you can go and read that thing again, and that is why it will improve the clarity. All right. Then we come to demerits of written communication. It is time consuming, right? As I already gave you the examples, waiting to write to your teacher and waiting to receive a written communication from your teacher, or waiting to write to your friend and waiting to receive a communication, written communication from your friend, will obviously take up a lot of time. So it is time consuming, and it lacks a personal touch. Okay, so if you get a letter from your friend, it will be less personal than the way you talk to him or her over phone, right? You can use expressions, you can also share certain ideas which you cannot share in writing. Okay, so written communication lacks a personal touch. All right, so these are some of the merits and demerits of oral and written communication. Then we come to formal and informal communication. Now, formal and informal communication, these are two kinds of communication depending upon the contexts where the communication process is happening. Okay, so formal communication refers to an official communication, and informal communication, it refers to uh, unofficial communication, which involves, let us say, communication between two friends. But a formal communication involves a communication between the principal and the students, for example. Okay, so formal communication will be structured. It has to have a particular structure and it follows a certain protocol. Okay, and there is deliberate exchange of information. There is some agenda in mind, some work needs to be done, and that is why formal communication is necessary. But informal communication between friends, relatives and family, it is casual. Okay, so always there need not be an agenda, right? If we want to talk to our mother, we go and talk to her for no particular reason, right? So that is an example of informal communication. It is casual, it is spontaneous, and it is unofficial exchange of information that occurs in social interactions or personal interactions. Okay. So formal and informal communication. Then we come to merits and demerits of formal and informal communication. Formal communication is structured and organized. I told you that it has to have a structure, right? So when you write an application to your principal, you need to write to the principal, so and so institution, and your application follows a structure, right? And it is organized, the way you present your problem, the way you write about what you want, right? So it has an organization. Okay, then, and because formal communication is structured and organized, it is better to understand. Okay, then formal communication is professional and reliable. Okay, so because it involves an organization and because it has a structure, there is a professional touch about formal communication, and it is reliable because you can go and verify that information. There is an organization, there are people working there. So if you have a doubt, you can go and verify that particular information. So there is something on the notice board. Okay, it is an example of Formal communication. There is something on the notice board. You're not able to understand it. You can go and ask your teacher. You can go and ask the people in the office. You can go and directly talk to the principal. So you can verify it. So in that way, it is reliable information contained in a formal communication. Okay. What are the demerits? Again, it is impersonal. Okay, so you won't have that personal touch in a letter on the notice board. Okay, and it can involve delays in information flow. So if you want to ask something to your teacher immediately, teacher can respond. But if you go for formal communication, that becomes a kind of informal communication if you have a good relationship with the teacher concerned. But if you are talking about um, an application that you write to the head of the department telling them why you were not coming to class all these days and why you could not appear the internal examination, so that is not an example of informal communication. That is an example of formal communication. And it might involve delays because you would be really afraid. Sometimes you are afraid to write a letter of that sort to your teacher because you fear that you might be misunderstood. Right? The teacher might not understand your problem if you do not go and speak to them, if you have to write this sort of an application. So formal communication can involve delays. Okay. Now we come to informal communication. What are the merits of informal communication? Building interpersonal relationships. So if you want to develop good relationships, you have to indulge in informal communication. Okay. So informal communication, apart from the words that you use, your gestures, your laughter, okay, and your concern that is visible on your face, all these things, they will help you build good relationships with others. Then speed. Informal communication, as I told you, if you want to ask something to your teacher informally, you can directly go and ask your teacher. Okay, so it increases the speed of communication. What are the demerits? Lack of accountability. Informal communication, there is lack of accountability. You cannot go and check like you can with formal communication. Informal communication, someone can always say, "Oh, I did not know it." So what if I told it to you? I was wrong myself. The person does not have the responsibility of being correct. But if there is something on the college notice board, it means it will be reliable. Okay, because there is an official signature at the end of the letter. Then spread of rumors, right? Rumors are wrong information, but they are spread because of informal communication. You hear something, then uh, you know, you did not understand it completely. While conveying that information to someone else, you change a bit, you change the information a bit, you modify it a bit. Then that person probably was not able to understand what you say completely, and that person when passing on the information might cause further change in the information, and that is how rumors are born. Okay, so if there is formal communication, you can always go and verify, but if there is informal communication, you cannot verify, right? And that is why there is spread of rumors because of informal communication. Okay, so these are some points regarding merits and demerits of formal and informal communication. Now we will come to different kinds of communication which we see within an organization, within an institution. So we have vertical and horizontal communication, we have diagonal communication, and we have grapevine communication. Now we will look at vertical and horizontal communication. Vertical and horizontal communication, are two types of internal communication methods in an organization. Internal communication methods means the people in a particular organization, they talk to each other. So the structure of that kind of communication will either be vertical or horizontal. Okay. Now, what is horizontal communication? When information flows between persons holding the same position in the organization, it is called horizontal communication. Okay, so in a college, all the heads of the departments, there are different departments, all the HODs, right? They are at the same level in that organization. Okay, so if there is a meeting between the heads of the different departments, they discuss a matter, among themselves, then that is an example of horizontal communication, where the information flow is horizontal. It is between communicators who are at the same level in an organization. Okay. Now, what is vertical communication? When communication occurs between the superior and the subordinates. Who is the superior in an organization? The person who occupies the highest position, okay, is the superior, and all others are subordinates. And, there are different levels of hierarchy, okay, in a particular organization. So someone occupying a higher position is the superior, and someone occupying a lower position is the subordinate. Okay. Now, when there is interaction between superior and subordinates, it is called vertical communication. Okay. Now, vertical communication can be upward or it can be downward. Okay. What is upward communication? Now you see, let us take the context of a college. So who is the superior? The principal is the superior, and all the other employees of that college, they are the subordinates. Okay. So suppose as a teacher, as an employee, I want to suggest something to the principal regarding the examination process. Now I go and make that suggestion to the principal. So it is from the subordinate to the superior. That kind of a communication is called upward communication, from the lower end to the upper end in an organization. Now, what is downward communication? Suppose the principal wants to make a suggestion to a particular teacher regarding some internal matter of the college. Now, that kind of communication will be from the superior to the subordinate, and that is why it will be downward communication. Okay, so I hope you get the idea of vertical and horizontal communication and upward or downward communication in vertical communication. Okay. Now, we will look at some merits and demerits of vertical and horizontal communication. Two merits of vertical communication would be that it maintains organizational discipline, right? So if there is a structure, if there is relationship between superior and subordinates, then that will maintain discipline in the organization. We cannot go and say anything that we want to the head of the institution. There is a certain protocol. We have to think about certain types of behavior when we want to communicate with someone who is superior to us. Okay. Then it also enables effective decision making. See, when we talk about decisions in an organization, the best decisions are taken when the subordinates, they understand why the head of the institution says something. Okay. And it also happens, good decision making also happens when the person who is superior, the head of the institution, values the opinions and suggestions of the people who are at the lower positions than him or her. Okay. And takes those suggestions, considers those suggestions, works on those suggestions. Then good decisions can be taken. So vertical communication, whether it is upward communication or downward communication, vertical communication enables effective decision making. What are the demerits of vertical communication? It can cause delay. As I said, if um, a peon, okay, has something to say to the principal, but the peon is afraid. What if the principal takes it in a different way? What if the principal does not understand why I want to say this? What if the principal is angry with me? So the peon is afraid and he holds back the information. Then it can cause delay in the process of communication. Then it can also reduce efficiency, right? Vertical communication can also reduce efficiency if it is not proper, right? So if the person who is superior thinks that they have the license to say whatever they want to, then of course it will demoralize those who are inferior to them. I mean, inferior, I use that word just to refer to the position in the hierarchy, okay, not to quality in that sense. So those who are subordinates, okay, so they will feel disheartened if some unjust remark has been made by the head of the institution. So it will reduce efficiency, because if the person is demoralized, if the person is sad, then definitely they will not be able to deliver well. And it can also reduce the efficiency of the head of the institution. How? If someone who is a subordinate does not take the advice of the head of the institution in the proper spirit, and just goes on creating chaos and havoc in the institution, saying dirty things about the head of the institution to anyone and everyone that they can talk to, just because they felt insulted. It might be a just remark, it might be a suggestion that will improve the working of that institution, but because a subordinate did not take it in the proper spirit, he or she will spread chaos in the institution. So it can also hamper the efficiency of the superior, right? The superior wants to have a particular kind of environment, but because of this attitude of the subordinate, the efficiency of the superior will be reduced. Okay, so it can work both ways. Then horizontal communication, what are the merits? It boosts team collaboration. So horizontal communication means communication happening between people at the same level. And often the people who occupy the same level, they form teams in an organization. Okay. So horizontal communication is necessary to increase the quality of teamwork, it improves team spirit, and it teaches the people what is meant by good collaboration. Okay, working together. Collaboration means working together. Then, horizontal communication increases problem solving speed, right? Just as I said, you might be afraid to talk to your superior, but you're not afraid to talk to people who are at the same level with you in the organization. So if there is a problem, you can go and talk to them immediately. So horizontal communication increases the problem solving speed. Then what are the demerits of horizontal communication? There is a risk of miscommunication, right? Because people occupy the same level, they don't have to write letters to each other, right? We won't get letters from each other because we are at the same level. We will, of course, prefer to go and talk to each other personally. And when we do that, there is a risk of miscommunication. There are risks of misunderstanding. Okay. Then there is another demerit. This may lead to conflicts. People occupying the same level, they don't want to understand each other's opinions, then they will fight, right? So this may lead to conflicts, but we will not fight with our superiors because there is a code of conduct. There is a discipline to be maintained. But when we are talking about people at the same level, we don't care that much about discipline. And if it is necessary, we will not, shirk from fighting even. All right. So this may lead to conflicts. Then we come to another kind of communication, that is diagonal communication. So if this is horizontal and this is vertical, then this kind of a communication will be diagonal. Okay. So it is a sort of hybrid, or it is a combination of vertical and horizontal communication. Let me give you an example. Suppose I talk about two departments in a particular organization, Department A and Department B. So both these departments are at the same level. All right. Now, in Department A, there is a superior, the head of the department, and there is a subordinate. Okay. In Department B, there is a head and there is a subordinate. Okay. Now, if the head of Department A goes and communicates with the subordinate of Department B, then that is an example of diagonal communication. Okay. So it is a direct dialogue between employees of differing ranks who belong to different departments. So differing ranks, right? So superior and subordinate, but not in the same department, in differing departments in an organization. Okay. That is what we mean by diagonal communication. What are the merits of diagonal communication? It increases collaboration, right? So, if the head of a particular department goes and talks to the subordinate of another department without thinking about protocol or without thinking about, the barriers between the two departments, and that is a good sign. It will be healthy for the whole organization. So it increases collaboration and it improves speed, right? So suppose the head of this department has to say something to the subordinate of the other department. Suppose the head thinks, no, it's not proper for me to go and talk to the subordinate. I should say this to the head, and the head should say this to his or her subordinate. I should say this to the head of the other department, and then the head of the other department will take care of how the subordinate is given that information. But this will delay the process. Okay, so if the person, the head of this department, goes and talks directly to the subordinate of the other department, then it improves speed of communication. But there are also demerits. What if, the subordinate of Department B has to say something to the superior of Department A, okay, and he or she thinks it is not necessary to convey this to my head of the department. Then, suppose in another time and in another place, the conversation is going on between the two heads of the departments, and the head of Department A conveys this information to the head of Department B. Then that person will not know anything about this piece of information, and the person will be at a loss. He or she will say that, he or she is not aware of this matter. Okay. So then the head of Department B will feel left out, right? Left out of the loop. And it can also lead to misunderstandings, right? Probably the subordinate from Department B shared this information with the head of the Department A because they were physically close together in a particular room. So it was easy to share that information, and that is why this communication happened. There was no other feeling. But the head of Department B might feel bad that my team member did not convey this to me. Rather, he or she conveyed this to the head of the other team, right? So this might create misunderstandings. Okay. So these are some of the merits and demerits of diagonal communication. See, it is always good to be aware of both sides of the coin. For any kind of communication, you need to know what are the advantages and what are the disadvantages, because in that case you will be able to use the advantages to your benefit, and you will be able to avoid the disadvantages if you are aware of all these things. Okay, then we come to another important kind of communication, that is communication within an organization, that is grapevine communication. Why is it called grapevine communication? Because it has the structure of a grapevine. Okay. Now, we have a definition given by a prominent figure in the field of organizational communication, Louis A. Allen. Okay. According to Allen, grapevine communication is an informal, unofficial, spontaneous communication system that arises within an organization, characterized by the transmission of information through personal interactions rather than formal channels. So it might seem, a bit difficult if we look at this definition together. But if we learn to break down the information into parts, then we will be able to understand it. First important point, grapevine communication happens in an organization. Okay. In that way, the space is official, but the nature of communication is not official, right? See, when we are part of an organization, we don't always talk about official things. We also talk about personal things. Okay, we talk about lighter matters. We don't always talk about work, right? Because we spend a certain period of time in our office. There are times, when we go to fetch water, and while fetching water, if two or three people, there is a tendency that they will share something, and it will be lighter talk. Okay. Now suppose, it is lunchtime, and so of course they will not be talking about big matters. They will be talking about personal things, and they will learn to enjoy their lunch. Okay. So these are examples of grapevine communication. Now, grapevine communication happens in an organization, but grapevine communication is informal and not formal. It is unofficial. All right. So it can take on various types or forms within an organization or social group based on how information spreads and the direction it takes. So even grapevine communication is of four types. Okay. Single strand chain, gossip chain, probability chain, and cluster chain. Okay. What are these kinds of grapevine communication? Now we will see. Single strand chain. I say something to the person next to me, then she goes and shares this information with some other person that she is comfortable with. Then that person goes and shares the information with another person. So when information flows, and we are talking about informal things, not formal things, not official things. Okay. So suppose we talk about a particular colleague, information about a particular colleague. Okay. Do you know? This is the thing. All right. So I tell someone, they tell someone else, then that is how information spreads. So information spreads in a linear way. Okay. The flow of information is in one direction. Then that is what we mean by single strand chain. Okay. Then we come to gossip chain. Gossip chain. Okay. One person is at the center, and there is a group of people, and I share gossip, right? It is again, gossip means unverified information, information which may be true, may not be true. We don't know. We cannot verify it. It is not official. Okay. So we are gossiping about something. So there is one person who shares this information with four or five different people. Okay. So one person is at the center of this chain, and that person is a source of gossip. Okay, then sharing this information with some other people. Okay, and here hierarchy does not matter. All right, so I may gossip with the head of my institution. I may gossip with somebody who is subordinate to me. I may gossip with somebody who is at the same level with me. Here the hierarchy is not important, just who are standing together in a particular point of time at a particular place. Okay, that is how gossip spreads. Then we come to probability chain. Probability. Okay, it means you have certain information, not official information. Okay, again, some personal information or something related to a particular employee, suppose. Okay, and you don't want to share this information with people who are close to that person. So you select with whom you will share this information. Okay, I will share it with this person, and this person. They are, I know them. They are people who will not, go and tell that person about whom this information is. Okay, because this information needs to be kept from that person. Okay, so I will select. These are the three people with whom I will share this piece of news. Okay, then that is how the probability chain functions. All right. Then we have cluster chain. See, in an organization, you will see clusters, right? People form groups. And when we are talking about informal groups, we usually hang out with people with whom we feel comfortable. Okay. So suppose A hangs out with B, C, and D. So A shares a particular piece of information with these three people. Now, C lives or shares a room with his or her colleagues F, E, and G. They live together at a particular place. So C will again share that information with the people who are his or her roommates. Okay. So we are talking about groups of these kinds. They are roommates, but they are not random roommates. They are people who work together and live together. Okay. So the setting of an organization is there, right? So this is what we mean by cluster chain. All right. And what all these kinds of communication are informal communication, but they will be related to the idea of organization in some way, and that is why it is grapevine communication. Okay. All right. Now we will talk about the merits and demerits of grapevine communication. What are the merits? Rapid transmission of information. Oh, gossip travels fast. Okay, rapid transmission of information. Now, two people will know about this particular piece of news, and within half an hour, almost the whole institution would be talking about it. So, grapevine communication functions in that way. It builds trust and transparency. On another note, okay, see, I'm not talking about gossip that is harmful. Sometimes grapevine communication, spreads information that is required. Okay. So this needs to be done in a particular room. This is not functioning, or in a particular room, this is the problem. So I go and share this with people I feel comfortable with. Then they go and share it with others. And this is how, the information would reach the head of the institution, and perhaps that matter will be attended to. Okay. So that I'm talking about information like that. Okay, so it's gossip is not always you see negative. All right, so it does have its positive connotations as well. All right, so there is rapid transmission of information, then builds trust and transparency. So if I feel comfortable with others, there will be a level of trust. All right. And transparency. See, suppose the head of the institution also interacts with people who are subordinate to him informally. Okay. So the head of the institution also asks about the families of his or her subordinates, or the head of the institution shares concerns about his children with those people who are subordinate to him. So it develops a good relationship, because uh, at the end we see that we are sharing humanities. Okay, we are being human, and we are in it together. So it builds a kind of trust and transparency. Even a person who is subordinate to the head, probably in a very formal context, cannot ask the principal questions. But when it is an informal context, probably he or she can ask that particular question to the principal and may receive an answer. Okay, so it increases transparency in the workings of the organization as well. Then, what could be the demerits of grapevine communication? Distractions and reduced productivity. We have to do an important work. This is the time when we do it. Okay, but we get distracted. There is some gossip going on and we want to listen to it. It's very interesting. And so we will go and attend to that and we will not do our work. So it is a kind of distraction and there is loss of productivity. Okay, we are not able to do as much work as we should do. All right. Then failure to observe confidentiality. See, because of grapevine communication, suppose the head of the institution, because he trusts another person who is his subordinate, shares the confidential information in an organization is information that is not meant to be shared with everyone. And an organization will definitely have confidential matters. Okay, it is very necessary for the health of the organization. Some matters need to be kept a secret. Okay, it is part of how an organization functions. So those are what we will call confidential matters. Okay, because if the confidentiality is lost, then there might be problems within the institution. Okay, sometimes because of grapevine communication, because the head trusts someone and they have shared such an information with that person, and it is grapevine communication, that means the person will again go and share that confidential information with someone who they think is close to them. Okay, and in this way a confidential piece of information will be transmitted, and then it might not be healthy for the organization. Okay, so these are some of the merits and demerits of grapevine communication. So these were some of the important concepts related to communication, and probably this lecture, this session will help you answer questions related to communication. Thank you for listening, and I hope you understand how it is very important to communicate well.